I think in times like this, you have to really think about why Bitcoin matters. And I'm a Bitcoin maxi, and I think Bitcoin is the future. And it is going back to this rules-based system where you have absolute certainty. You're absolutely certain of the upper limit of Bitcoin. There's 21 million. That's it. And that should be enough to, rebase the entire world's economy on. So that's 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. And it's just a mathematical formula, and it does not change over time. And that's it. So the way I look at it is this is a ruler. And it's a ruler by which you measure every other thing, just like you measure water in liters and milliliters, and you measure distance in kilometers or miles if you're American. There has to be a unit to measure monetary value, and that is Bitcoin. And this is why I think we will be seeing hyper-Bitcoinization, and we'll see everything being priced in terms of Bitcoin or Satoshis. So yeah, like everything that's happening in the world today really just shows nothing matters except for Bitcoin. That's the only thing that matters, and everything else should be readjusted to be priced in terms of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin has just shattered its all-time monthly closing record, soaring to $104,486. It's the clearest sign yet that the wave of mass adoption Samson Mow predicted is here. As the CEO of Jan3, Mow has been on a mission to make Bitcoin the backbone of global finance, and right now, the tides are turning in his favor. A few years ago, many laughed at the idea of nation-states stacking Bitcoin. Today, that narrative has flipped. Earlier this year, New Hampshire and Texas each passed strategic reserve bills to start accumulating Bitcoin. Even Pakistan, driven by a vision of energy efficiency and economic resilience, allocated 2,000 megawatts of electricity specifically for Bitcoin mining. They're serious about building a strategic Bitcoin reserve. These moves aren't isolated. They're part of a global chorus signaling that governments see Bitcoin as a hedge and a future financial pillar. On the corporate front, Brazil's fintech powerhouse Melius recently filed to raise $26.45 million to buy more Bitcoin for its treasury. This strategy isn't just bold, it's working. Bitcoin's price run has surged over 50% with a mild 7% pullback since April. Textbook behavior for an asset gaining serious traction. When funds flow in, prices follow, and right now all signs point upward. But what does all this mean for 2025? Why does Samson Mow believe Bitcoin is on a rocket ship trajectory? In this video, we'll dive deep into his predictions, dissect the forces at play, and explore how these adoption tailwinds could send Bitcoin to new heights. Before we jump in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button if you're excited about Bitcoin's future. Drop a comment below with your price prediction for 2025. Where do you think Bitcoin is headed? Share this video with someone who needs to hear about these seismic shifts. And if you haven't already, subscribe for the latest Bitcoin and crypto insights. Thanks for watching. Let's dive into Samson Mow's bold vision for Bitcoin in 2025.
Yeah, so there are probably a number of countries that are quietly accumulating, and we see little bits and pieces here and there, and a lot of times it's accidental that it's revealed. Like Bhutan was a secret until they got caught up in, I think, the Celsius filings, and it was revealed that they were holding Bitcoin, and then they kind of came out publicly and said, we're mining Bitcoin with excess energy, and they published some of their balances. So it's almost like the incentive is for countries to quietly accumulate until they can't. But then you also have cases like the US where they're making a big proclamation that we are going to go into Bitcoin in a big way. And I think that's actually more likely because it's difficult for countries to hide things from the public, or at least ideally it shouldn't be the case, because the governments need to be accountable to the people. And if they're doing things in secret, that's not really the ideal situation. So I think going forward, you'll see more proclamations like we are implementing a strategic reserve. We're going to be buying Bitcoin. We're going to be mining Bitcoin. And that's sort of where we come in as Jan3. It's our mission to work with governments to implement Bitcoin strategies for the sake of world prosperity. And I think there are many pitfalls that governments can go into when they're trying to figure out what they want to do with Bitcoin, right? But there are people out there trying to conflate Bitcoin and crypto. And I know some of your audience is crypto, but I think you have to segment the market. There's Bitcoin, there's crypto, and then stable coins. So there are distinct pockets of different types of things that you can invest in. And you need to really be able to distinguish between the different things. So when Trump was trying to start the U.S. on the path of strategic crypto adoption, there was talk of, is it a strategic Bitcoin reserve or a strategic crypto reserve? And there was a time at which it looked like they wanted to stick a bunch of other crypto in there, like American-made cryptos. And I think that really opens the door to uh, you know real degeneracy, right? Like if you start adding every single crypto or selected ones, you're kind of picking winners and losers. And where's the line cut off? Is it meme coins too or not? Because what is the difference really between an old meme coin like Doge that is relatively decentralized and still based off proof of work versus something like I don't know, the newer dog coins. I don't even know the names now, but that can get really bad really quickly. So I guess what we try to do is steer governments to just focus on Bitcoin. If you want to take a libertarian leaning and say everything's okay, then just let everything else proliferate. But focus your messaging, focus your effort, focus your attention on Bitcoin, and that's it. Otherwise, you're getting into a really difficult game of trying to police, regulate, and select good coins to kind of put into a reserve or to adopt in some form or fashion.
I think there's about 10 countries that officially hold Bitcoin. Now, most of those countries didn't actually buy it. They got it through seizures, right? So like, do you even count those, right? But that's a low number in where we all think this is going, right? Where eventually all governments will own Bitcoin and it'll replace gold as digital gold and be this, global reserve asset, right? So, you give me, like, is 10 the actual number? Is it more than that? Can you even talk about this stuff?
There are, like government entities that are actively involved, right? It may not be at top federal levels, but there are provincial, municipal entities that are, actively involved, particularly in mining in different places around the world. So it's not as clean cut as this country is adopting, and it's a top-down initiative, and they have these policies in place. It's a much messier landscape than most people would estimate it to be. But I think it will become a more predominant pressing topic. So we're going to start to see a lot more movement towards Bitcoin, and it has a lot to do with the US. So you're asking earlier, how is the understanding? I think there is a decent understanding. At least there is an understanding that Bitcoin is valuable, and Bitcoin is the best performing asset probably ever. But the concern really is career risk, or political career risk in this case, whereby it's risky for them to push for something until someone else does it in a big way to eliminate the career risk. And you see this with the ETFs. So Hong Kong and Australia followed suit after the US and the SEC kind of blessed it and BlackRock went out. And I think more and more countries are opening up. I think Korea, Japan now are opening the doors to ETF access, Bitcoin ETF access. But it's the same for like spot or mining adoption of Bitcoin. There is a perceived risk, which is diminishing by the day as the US moves further and further into implementation stages. But I think it's really just the rest of the world is waiting to see. And it's kind of sad that countries should be willing to, take a risk, even if it's a small risk. And at this point, it's a really calculated and minimal risk too. Like allocating 1% of GDP to accumulate Bitcoin is almost like a minuscule insurance policy, if anything. But, countries are looking at ways they can protect themselves. And as the world is kind of splintering into a more multipolar, more dissected political and power structure, I think countries are going to start to look really seriously at their Bitcoin policies and what they're doing to kind of protect themselves. And it's like going back to a gold standard, but in this case, it's digital gold, whereby you have reserves. And the point of having reserves is for power, negotiating leverage, or having the ability to mine Bitcoin and process your own transactions, which allows you to freely transact without anyone censoring you too. So everything is moving faster. I think we're wired to think the adoption is going to take 20 years, 30 years. But if you look at everything that's happening in the world today, the timeline is just rapidly accelerating. Like the nation state attack was, I would say, China cracking down on Bitcoin exchanges and mining. And then you had El Salvador adopting Bitcoin. And then you have countries mining Bitcoin. And now you have the US, which is a massive indicator of Bitcoin adoption moving forward. And it's just a matter of time before legislation turns into active buy pressure. And it could definitely be this year. At least I think they're targeting this year.
They are, yeah.
But more so than that, they actually need to be buying this year. It's not about what they want. It's about necessity. And you can see some of this leaking out through initiatives like Department of Government Efficiency. Why the sudden pivot to cut costs and save? Because I think they realized the US is far too much in debt. The debt is yet to be refinanced, and it could be at a higher rate than they would like, which accelerates the debt spiral, and it decreases the credit worthiness of the US. But all of these things seem to be an effort, including tariffs, to distract or mitigate the current economic situation and restore sound money. The real litmus test is buying. The legislation is kind of the setup to get to the point of buying. And it takes time. Like, even after legislation is passed, I would assume there are more procedural things like, is it self-custodied? How is that set up? Is it with a custodian? There is an order of operations to get to the stage at which you're buying. But I think they have to accelerate that. And, there are lots of really well-qualified Bitcoiners and companies in the US that are positioned to help with that. But the race is on. Either it's going to happen first at the state level, or it will happen first at the federal level, or another country is going to step in and start buying. But the tariff situation and also the weakness in demand for US treasuries, I think, will start to funnel money from other countries into Bitcoin. Because if you think about everything on a very high level, where are you going to park your capital? Are you going to put it in real estate? And it certainly doesn't help that Besant is saying things like, Chinese stocks can be removed from the stock exchanges. There is rumblings of eminent domain, like seizing assets. All of these things will spook other sovereign nations to do anything with US assets, right? Whether it's a US-based ETF, or if it's just equities, or if it's treasuries or real estate. And when you ask yourself that question, what is the answer? Where do you go? It is just Bitcoin. There is really nothing else that is fully decentralized, permissionless, and without any interested party controlling it. So I see that we're going to see a massive flight of capital into Bitcoin. And you compound that with the tariffs and the trade war and fear of the Chinese yuan devaluing. And that just makes it even more likely and faster that capital will flow into Bitcoin.
And there you have it, Samson Mow's insights. With the tides shifting in the financial world, from rising inflation to growing distrust in traditional systems, the question now is, where is Bitcoin headed in the next 180 days? Can you imagine a world where a significant chunk of global wealth flows into Bitcoin? A world where people finally recognize it as the ultimate store of value, immune to government control, untouched by institutional manipulation, and fully decentralized. That future may be closer than we think. So now, we want to hear from you. Where do you see Bitcoin going in the next 6 months? Drop your predictions in the comments, bullish or bearish. Let's talk about it. If you found this insightful, give the video a like and share it with someone who needs to see what's coming. And if you're passionate about Bitcoin, crypto, and staying ahead of the financial curve, hit that subscribe button. We post daily updates to keep you informed and ahead of the game. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.